Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Kenrick Nelson, and Andre Villela and Megan Hess have been working with me on the Diversify Voting Influence Project. We're using this discussion after town hall to present our final results. That'll take about 25 minutes. And then we're really looking forward to your feedback on the results and suggestions about how we move the project forward. So I will go ahead and share my screen and manage the slides. So let me do that now. And as I do that, I'm just going to juggle things around a little bit before I formally start so that my screen is clear. And then I'm going to put it in presentation mode. Okay. All right, can everyone see the slides well? All right, I'll take that as a yes. So this is the Diversified Voting Influence Project, and Megan is going to introduce the project and the team.
Yeah, thanks, Kenrick. So one big question that was really guiding this whole project is finding which system which voting system balances influence best. As hopefully all of you are aware, Project Catalyst currently has sort of the 1 coin, 1 vote policy. So your voting power is directly correlated to the number of ADA that you hold. We were looking at somewhere between that and a 1 person, 1 vote, because we want to sort of even the playing field, I guess you could say, so that there's not the risk that the wealthy few are really having all of the say in the decisions, but also not going all the way down to 1 person, 1 vote, where you're not really rewarding people for holding ADA. So we have sort of 3 phases for this project. What we're presenting mostly on today is the completion of our Fund 4 results. So we were doing research to find sort of the best proposed method, and we found two sort of solutions combined: square root allocation to balance the influence, and then quadratic voting method to provide some kind of way to focus your interest. And then phase 2 will be in Fund 6. To actually design and simulate algorithms to model what we've decided on, and then Fund 7 to prototype a diversified voting method. Yeah, so I am very honored to be a part of this team of awesome physicists. We have Kenrick Nelson, our team lead, who's really passionate about complex system modeling. Andre, I thought it was Vieira, is that right? Or Villela, over in Brazil at the university. He's working on actual simulation and mathematical design. And me, I'm just here, you know, to help in any way I can. I've been really enjoying being part of the discussions. I'm working to also provide a partnership with WADA as we're working throughout Africa to bring people into Project Catalyst and, you know, incorporate sort of our reach with this project as well. So I'm hoping to engage the community and provide some outreach. Okay, so our original proposed objectives are here. Essentially, for this phase 1, we wanted to actually design some protocols that Cardano could use to incentivize more diversity in the voting process, and then to provide an analysis of why this is even needed. What does this saturation of voting influence mean? How does it work that this one group, you know, how much control do they actually have over the vote versus others? And then finally, to actually develop a plan for what we want to model in phase 2. So there's the kind of overview, and then I'll pass it on to Andre for some of the more specific details.
Sure. Thank you, Megan. So yeah, first, before proposing some solutions for this issue, we took a look at the ADA distribution across wallets for Fund 4. We also did that for Fund 5. We are going to show the results to you. But what is important here for you to notice? As you can see, the majority of wallets have like 500 to 10,000 ADA, which is represented by the height of each of those black bars there. And as you all can see, the median is right there. So if you take a probability density of wallets, the majority of wallets that you have involved in Fund 4, had something close to 10,000 to 5,000 ADA. And as you can see by the blue line, the mean is very distant from it. So the majority of users have 5,000, 4,000 ADA, but the average amount of ADA involved when you sum all the wallets is close to 100,000. So those lines are very distant from each other. So this means that you have a very small amount, few users with huge ADA wallets. And what we want to do is to try to balance this for people with smaller wallets to have a good influence, a great influence when compared to those big wallets. So we have to try to get these two different sizes together when the times to perform a decision, is there. So we don't want for those big wallets to dominate over several users. So we also compared our statistical results with between Fund 4 and 5, which was the data that we had at that time. And as you can see, from one fund to the other, you had an increase in the total wallets involved, 42, 43%. The maximum value of one wallet also increased by 40%, which is it's absurd. It's too much. But the mean and the median, they did change, like they are in the same place. So you have more people joining this, but the shape is the same. It's like the public that is joining to vote. It's like they all have the same face, the same wallet size, the same wallet distribution. So you have more people involved and you still have those dominant wallets with bigger amount of ADA, and the majority of the people having like 5,000 ADA. So what we did next, let's give a situation for you to think about it. So let's suppose why this is an issue for us. Let's suppose that you have an election that you can cast to have 25 people, and they are going to vote yes or no in some project, okay? But because of the probability of the statistics of the majority vote, you have some like non-trivial results. Like let's suppose that you have these 25 people, 25 votes, or let's say 25 ADA, and they are going to vote yes or no. If you have 5 of those guys, just 5 guys there, that okay, let's join together and vote yes. We are not going to change that. And you have a scenario where people doesn't know what to vote. If they're going to vote yes or no, they are in doubt. They don't know which option to have in this issue. So if those 5 guys fix their votes, they are not changing. The result of this pool will be in this direction by 84%. So they can dominate the election, just having 5 votes that they are not going to change. And if you have a group of 15 guys, the desired result can be achieved with 99.9% of chance. So if you map this to the ADA Fund 4, you have 3.2 billion ADA involved. And if you have a wallet of size like 60,000 ADA, and the rest of the wallets are undecided in what to vote, you can have the result as you want by 84%. So this is the amount of ADA that you need to dominate a very, a very stressful election where you don't know if the yes is going to win or the no is going to win. So in this situation where people are in doubt and watch the vote, you have this amount of ADA to dominate the election. So it's a small number, right? So this is an illustration of this issue. Now, can we go to the next one? So what we propose, we took the ADA distribution, which looked like this orange. We added all the wallets with that range, like, yeah, let's get everyone that has 500 ADA. Let's add them up. Let's do the same with 1,000 ADA. Let's add them up. And then we have those orange bars. And the numbers above them is the number of wallets that got that bar so high. So as you can see, the natural distribution of Cardano wealth is in orange. And if we square root the ADA of each wallet, you shift the distribution to the center. Can you see that? So instead of having this parabola shape, you have this mountaintop shape, like the bigger influence that you have in this voting process will be given to those people at the center. So you are going to increase the influence of smaller wallets, as you can see from orange with almost nothing to a dashed bar, the first dashed bar here from left to right. And you are going to decrease the influence of those big wallets. And yeah, this is the square root model or allocation of voting power. This is investigator of how can you give votes for nations. Like, yeah, you have a population which is very big, and how can you represent this population here like in a world organization? How can you represent those people in the number of votes that you can cast here? So this is what we are doing there. We are square rooting the ADA wallets, and we are shifting the power to the center of the distribution, which is the same to, okay, if we take away the wallet size, let's give the power, the decision power, to the average wallet size. That's it, where the majority of people are. That's it. So the majority is going to decide this voting mechanism, this voting pool or scenario that you have. So this is what we are going to do by doing this. We also tried other fractions. And in this one in particular, we tried like, okay, let's take a 3/4 root of 3/4 root of the wallet size. And we also reduce the influence of big wallets, and we increase the influence of smaller wallets, but now the distribution looks sharper to the middle. So we are increasing even more the majority of wallets that have that intermediate number of ADA involved in a voting process. But we have much more to include to achieve this equality in the voting power for each individual, and having a real representative result when you have those voting scenarios. Let's Kenrick talk. Let me allow Kenrick to talk about something that we are also developing.
Thank you, Andre and Megan. That was great. And the results that Andre showed were really kind of the core thing that we proposed. But in our literature review, we came across a very important idea that would also improve the voting process. So this square root rule, as Andre described, really balances the influence. And in particular, I think one of the goals that we would set there is that we want to make sure that one ADA coin has the same voting power influence, irrespective of whether it's in a large or a small wallet. And it turns out that as you can correlate votes together, your voting power grows quadratically. And that's where this invention of the square root rule came from. Now, there's a similar proposal that's referred to as the quadratic voting method that was invented by Glenn Weil, and he and his colleague Eric Posner have written some nice papers and textbooks on this. And additionally, this has already been implemented in some other cryptocurrency communities. What this does is it gives people the ability to express their preference for proposals. Rather than just a yes, no across all the proposals, you would have a voting budget. And then you would think like an investor, how do I want to spend my budget on these proposals? That's going to be important as people express about the scaling, because we're already up to 711 proposals, and that's going to continue to grow. But the innovation here, I think, is important, and I think it's important to do this before we go to a representative type system. What it does is, this is a little graphic I pulled from the Moogle Productions, which is another cryptocurrency project, where they're allocating stars. This is kind of a Hollywood select movies kind of application. But for instance, if you have 10,000 stars, then you get 100 allocation of votes credit, or the square root. It costs you quadratically to have voting power, but it's not. This is how you allocate to different proposals. And just before I go into it a little more detail, the Ethereum community has implemented this in something they call Gitcoin, and the Algorand community has just recently funded QVote to implement something like this. So let's look at it a little more carefully. Again, what we want to do is we want to move away from one coin, one vote to something more like one coin, one decision power index. And as an example, if you started with 100 ADA, you would be allocated 10 voting power. And now how could you use that voting power? In this quadratic voting method, you could apply one vote across 10 different proposals, yes or no on each one, or you could allocate 9 of your voting powers to make 3 votes on one proposal. So you'd have the ability to express that I care about this particular project better, but your ability to do that would be dampened so that we don't get overly strong opinions. And this has been shown to have a nice property of kind of formulating Gaussian type curves about the community's opinions on different proposals. And so just looking at that a little bit closer now. So here's an example. If we had 2 individuals, one of which had 10,000 ADA in the wallet, that individual would get 100 voting power. On the other hand, an individual with 1 million ADA in their wallet would get 1,000 voting power. That's the square root rule. And now we can think about, if say the first person really liked proposal 1 and the second person really liked proposal 3, how do they want to spread out their votes? So the first individual can spend up to 100, and they can spend either 100 across 100 different proposals, or if they want to concentrate all of their vote, they can vote 10 times on one proposal. And likewise, the individual who started with 1 million now has 1,000 voting power, and they can spend that across one vote for potentially 1,000 proposals, or they can concentrate it up to a concentration of 31 votes on one proposal. So whereas in the beginning here, there was 100x difference in their voting power, we bring that down to 10x with the square root voting. And then if we also add the quadratic voting, there's just a 3x difference between what these individuals can express on one particular proposal. So what we're hopeful for is that this is a path towards really implementing the aspiration of having a truly decentralized decision-making process for the Cardano Catalyst community. And I think the values are there. I think the community is really committed and working towards this. but we also have some hard work ahead in terms of how we design the voting system to actually implement that aspiration. So we are hopeful we'll find out tomorrow whether we got our funding for Fund 6 to design and simulate these ideas. And then we've also proposed a challenge for Fund 7 to work with other members of the community on implementing a prototype. And we're kind of thinking in stages of how this might get implemented. We think it would be a good idea to maybe start with a modest power law first of either 3/4 or 4/5, because there is a need to monitor and determine some ways of controlling people splitting their wallets. But we also think there's solutions. I think even just, having in the registration form, a commitment that you're only using one wallet to vote would be some self-control in the community. We think that you can measure the correlation between the way wallets are voting, so that if you measured high correlation between the wallets, maybe you would treat that as one entity that has to have a power law allocation to it. And then finally, if we're make progress on that part of it, then we think it would be really worthwhile to implement this quadratic voting prior to a representative process. Because while representative democracy is certainly very important, if you combine that with one coin, one vote, you're really going to dilute the smaller wealth holders in the community to the point that they just don't have the ability to influence decisions. And then finally, Cardano is making a lot of progress with digital identity with the Atala Prism program. And we do think this will add to the capability, because that'll give a very clear control over making sure that it's one entity, maybe not one person, but one entity that is in control of a particular voting process. These is a list of some of the most key references. And I really want to congratulate Andre in particular, who has done quite innovative work in this area. And then we've drawn broadly from the literature. And then these are also links to both this presentation, the references file, and then in the GitHub, there's our regular reports that we've been giving each month. So thank you for being patient as we went through the proposal. We're eager to take your questions. So I'm going to take it out of presentation mode for the moment. And here's a picture of the community. We do hope our project is supporting the broad community and making sure that they have a real voice in how we make decisions. So thank you all, and we'd love to hear your questions.
Kendrick, it was a great presentation. I'm glad I finally got to see the end of it, the final
Great
results.
stuff. Yeah.
Do you happen to have a link to that, to the presentation that you can share with us?
Yes.
So that we can download it.
I think I can just put it right in the chat room now, because I did it earlier too. And
Okay.
there it is.
And then I have a, all right, great. Another question for you about the voting. Have you looked at the option, maybe you have looked at the option of actually one wallet, a wallet votes, but then you weigh the votes based on, I don't know how to explain it. The votes are then weighted instead of like the number of votes that you get are based on your ADA. The weight of your vote is based on your wallet. Like you get to vote on whatever you want, and then it's tied to your wallet, and then it's back weighted towards based on your algorithm that way.
Yeah, so we haven't.
Does that make sense?
We haven't made a lot of, this first phase was kind of to evaluate different protocols. We haven't tried to design a protocol yet, but that's what we've proposed for Fund 6. And like you're describing, I think something like that probably is important, because you can think of one wallet as having 100% correlation. every ADA in that wallet necessarily votes the same way, given the current design, and even what we would propose as a new design. However, I think correlations between wallets is also something that should be considered, both because of this possibility of splitting wallets, but also because of the way communities, both in a positive way, but potentially in a manipulative way, communicate with each other and coordinate their voting. And so it might be worthwhile. It's going to take some experimentation and some analysis, but we think it's worthwhile to measure the correlation between the way wallets are voting, and when they're highly correlated, treat that as a single cohort.
I got you. I just want to, while you were doing the presentation, I did the square root of a square root.
Mhm.
And I don't know if y'all messed around with that or not. I just figured I'd look at it. Somebody else put the cube root, and if that would make a difference. I think it was Philip put that in the chat. But it looked
Right.
pretty interesting, to where, like you were saying, like the wallet votes on whatever they want, and then at the end of the voting session, that's when you weigh their vote based upon whatever formula that you decide
Yeah.
to come up with. And using the square root of square root, it actually brings it really tight and really.
That's right. So
And I just brought that up. So I mean,
yeah, no, that's right. And in a way, our combination of the square root and the quadratic voting has that same effect. If the two wallets both only vote on one proposal, it would effectively be a cube root, it would be a fourth root allocation of the votes in that case. Harris, why don't you go ahead with your question?
Yeah, no, I think this is just amazing research, and yeah, I work for Input Output as a product manager, working and focused on Catalyst, and this subject is actually very near and dear to my heart in terms of things that I'm focused on and helping, and some of that is the voting mechanism.
Yeah.
And some of the early pilots that we actually want to run is to actually have the community to set the Catalyst parameters. And one of the parameters is voting power.
Okay.
And so this is exactly the type of
great. So yeah, we'd love to talk to you more.
And work that we can actually effectively apply. And there's several voting mechanisms that we want to work out, but Catalyst parameters is kind of the place we can start.
Okay.
So one of the questions is, how do we get the voice of the community to say, oh, it should be square root or it should be quadratic? These are all great ideas, but we should hear from the community and find out, okay, what should we start with? And so we could vote on that parameter.
Yeah.
We could also apply a parameter and see how it worked. And so there's a few things that I can directly help to engage and put into action. And again, this is one of the very first things that we want to start focusing on with Catalyst to help the community control how this actually gets applied in the process. Because we do want to avoid the oligarchy and the power. So we definitely appreciate your research and what you've done and accomplished so far. It's amazing. That's great.
Yeah, super. That's great to hear. And yeah, in fact, in our Challenge 7, that was suggested by some of the other IOG team members who were mentoring us in the project. So we appreciated that suggestion. And we think either voting on one of the challenges that's like going to be in Fund 8 would be a way to kind of test this out as a prototype, or like you could do it sort of in dual and kind of compare the results, or we were thinking about setting up a particular vote, and maybe these parameters could be one of the things we vote on this way. So that would be interesting. Philip, could you go ahead with your question?
Yeah, thank you. And like Harris said, huge congrats, huge respect, you know, to just simply tackle such a complicated, difficult issue, not only mathematical, but also social and, you know, and, you know, Megan work in WADA is amazing. Andre, you know, Kendrick, great things. But okay, all the applauding aside, I was thinking, I mean, I don't know if you have this data, but and I don't know, but let's say you made your analysis of the square root on fund 4
Mhm.
wallet distribution, right?
Yeah.
Do you have enough data to let's say we run 3 different simulations. We run square root, cube root, fourth root, nth root, doesn't matter. Then we do something fancy, new, whatever. Do you have enough data to simulate the outcome, which
Yeah.
projects would get funding? How much would that change, right?
Yes, that's
Maybe not publish it.
definitely one of the outcomes we've proposed for Fund 6. And McCall, who is on the Voltaire team and the lead developer for the Voltaire effort, has been working on getting us that data. So what he was able to provide us in this round was the distribution of the wallets.
Okay.
But he explained that there's more coding involved to actually get us the data for how each wallet voted on each proposal. So we don't have that data yet, but McCall and the IOG team has committed to providing that. So we're hopeful that, you know, that's exactly what we'll try to work on during the next round of the project. And I'd agree that we'd like to see, we think from this analysis, you know, that there is this kind of overemphasis on the very large wallets in terms of the decision processing right now. And we totally acknowledge, and I want to say up front that, you know, what we've done so far is a huge step towards decentralized decision processing, and just the ability to, whatever your wallet size, the ability to vote on this kind of a project and have this kind of influence is fantastic. But we're learning and growing as we build the system out. So for sure, it would be great to see, you know, how the decision-making would have changed given the proposals that we're recommending.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about maybe, because like you said, it adds a whole other level of complexity, right? Let's say you have 500 proposals. Some of them have a lot of people voting for them, some of them not so much. And then if you take the square root, maybe it would significantly, maybe if it would even break the system, maybe it would give some results that are nonsensical, right?
Yeah.
And then at least you have, okay, this doesn't work, we have to find something else, or we have to build on it. I think it's very,
yeah. Well, and the other thing I'd emphasize is I had to kind of hold Andre back, because that kind of analysis is actually his real expertise. And I emphasized in this first round that we really couldn't do those simulations until we understood the issues better. But I would encourage anyone who wants to dig in further to take a look at Andre's papers, because he has dozens of articles on using Monte Carlo simulations to really understand the dynamics of majority vote processes. And we're looking forward to working together to, you know, put this work into a good scientific paper as well. Frederick, could you go ahead with your question?
Yes, thank you. No, not just a question, but also congratulations on the work done. I think it's a very interesting work you're doing on diversifying the voting influence. The current voting is already limited with the 500 ADA minimum. Not everybody participates. So do you have like an application where even the smaller amounts, because as we go forward, those numbers will decrease? Because I believe that at the beginning, it could also be a benefit to have those influential wallet voting. For example, if you were to look at all the Africa focusing, possibly those guys had a role in it. So now if we go in the future and we have like millions of new users from Ethiopia coming in with $10 wallets, and they're like the majority in the system, then how do you listen to those people who actually went to look for? So I think if you implement a system where even the zero balance could be equated to zero, it's not a problem, but a positive number could always be positive in some ways. That also will be another improvement.
Yeah, so we didn't specifically look at that issue for this project, but the Voltaire and Catalyst teams are looking at that. And as they showed in the town hall meeting today, I think back to Fund 2, it was the minimum was like 8,000 ADA, and then it was reduced down to say 4,000 ADA, and now it's down to 500. So their goal has been to lower that. There's both technical challenges, that is, you bring more people into the process and more wallets, you have to have the infrastructure to actually process the voting. But then there's also security issues, because while we definitely want to encourage a broad community of people to participate, we also want to defend the system from people who might seek to manipulate and actually be destructive in their in the decision process. And so there's both infrastructure issues, and then there's also security issues in both, lowering the minimum threshold, but also in our own design, where that's why there's this need for balance. And one of the things, we're making an analogy right now that just as the square root voting was applied to representative governments in order to make sure that the individual being represented still has the same influence, irrespective of whether they come from a large or small community. We want to see if we can design a process where each ADA has the same voting influence, whether it's in a large or a small wallet. Other questions? And people can maybe feel free to jump in too a little bit.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in learning more about some of the simulations. I definitely know from building computer structures that we need to do simulation to try lots of things and see where patterns of things go based on weighting of specific types of voters or whatnot.
Okay, yeah, Andre, maybe you could
learn more about Monte Carlo.
Yeah, Andre, why don't you talk a little bit about your prior research and what we've proposed for Fund 6?
Sure. Yeah. Since I was a kid in physics, I am a PhD in physics, and my research field always was complex phenomena. So you have a big, a huge number of components, and they interact in a complicated way. But and we model those interactions, and we take a look at the emergent phenomena that you get. Like, yeah, people are complicated, but at the end you have a president, So we put these features, let's say, of this complex system with a huge number of components in mathematical models or physical models. And then we can use different kinds of simulation. If you have some equations and transition probability equations, you can integrate those equations to have your result. This is what people, people does in those research about COVID spreading. Like, you have equations about the number of infected, and then if you vaccinate 70%, the infection, dies out. So this is using integrating equations, temporal equations. My models, I use Monte Carlo simulations. So I have we write some transition probabilities, like people are going to vote, you are going to vote yes, and you too, okay, maybe I'm going to vote yes too. So people interact with each other to decide what to do. So in my simulations, I write those transitions probability of you to be convinced by your neighbors to vote yes or no about some social issue. And then we let the simulation run, and those transition probabilities reach the stationary, value, and then you have a final state of the system. Okay, people are going to discuss, but at the end they will have this decision, this group decision, or they cannot achieve a consensus about something. So in our models, we write those probabilities and we include other factors. Like, yeah, there are individuals who always follows the majority. They don't care. They like, oh, now, which candidate are going to vote? Okay, I'm going to. So we include this. We include social temperature, like social anxiety in systems that I investigate for market dynamics. I also investigate some systems to comprehend how stock markets behave, So I also use Monte Carlo simulations. I write equations of, people are going to buy if the price is rising, people are going to sell if the price is decreasing, but not everyone is doing this strategy. There are guys that buy when the price is going down and sells when the price is going up. I include all of this in a simulation, a complex network in my computer simulations that I write in C and let it run. And then I analyze the results using physics, because those systems behave like magnetic systems. It's the same. And what I think is special about this is because at the end, I think social physics is responsible for every social phenomenon that we observe, like electing a representative, but are we going to get vaccinated or not? This is not about, health. This is about social stuff. My friends are all getting vaccinated, so I'm going to. So no, they are not getting vaccinated because they are afraid, so I'm also afraid. So yes, COVID is something, there is something, some dynamics involved, but at the end, it's our social behavior that determines the final result. So this is my first concern in investigating those systems composed by people, So yeah.
Thanks, Andre. And before I take Steve's question, is there any feedback for Andre? Are there any follow-up questions on what he just described?
Yeah, it's definitely really, really helpful. Yeah, I don't know if there's much visualization you can pull out of it, or if it's just sort of a list of numbers, but it would be really, really great to see that.
I can share some of my results if you want.
Yeah, that would be fascinating.
You know what, Andre, you can pull some out for, maybe we'll share them in a few minutes. And then Steve, maybe you can bring your question to the community. You want to go ahead, Steve?
Thank you. Yeah. So you said something about, the influence of your close associates or influence of friends or, in social. The interesting thing that's different here is that you don't know how the vote is going. You don't know what folks are doing as a herd. You might know about a couple folks.
Yeah.
So it's completely different than a lot of voting that you might have modeled in the past. I'm just wondering, were you just talking in general terms, or have you factored that somehow into what you've done here?
I'll let Andre take that question. Go ahead, Andre.
No, I'm talking about what I did. I proposed this influence between agents, but I'm not. We did not any simulation by proposing this for this funding voting. So this is how I tackle my problems in physics, in social physics, in economic physics, in complex systems. But we still are going to develop some strategy for Cardano fund voting. Because of this that you said. Yeah.
Well, and what I would add to that, Steve, too, is that there's kind of 2 and maybe even 3 steps to this. So a lot of the work that Andre does in his modeling would be prior to anyone voting, but kind of modeling their interactions as a community. And so like if you talk with, for instance, all the communication that goes on in the proposal round, in the Discord channels, in the community advisor reviews, all of those are part of sort of the social interaction that Andre tries to model at a very simple kind of physics level. So that's one part of it. And then that shapes how people actually vote. And then like you're describing, the actual vote, we kind of each do individually, but what we do is shaped by our social interactions over the prior month or so as these proposals were developed. And then it's a third potential step is that if there could be like a real-time system, then maybe you could actually see how people are voting, and that might change your own opinion about the votes. Now, that's an even harder process, but it would be quite interesting. You know, like I could imagine, for instance, if we think about this quadratic voting process where, you know, people early on might have a certain level of power, but then once a proposal became kind of dominant in the opinions, it would cost you more to add to that opinion. But that's kind of speculative at this point. Other thoughts or questions? Ashton, did you have a question? I saw you raise your hand at one point. Did you have a question for us?
Yeah, I didn't know if it would be useful or if you could, in addition to using the power law scaling to quantify the vote, also use a way to, it's hard for me to put into words.
Okay.
But if you could, for instance, in the way I would do it trivially or naively would be to, if a person could, given the vote they do cast, then be able to cast, if that proposal failed, where their vote would go instead, and then use that to, I don't know if that's something you've already done or.
Yeah,
You're talking about
But
ranked
as a way
choice
to-
voting, right?
yeah, the ranked choice voting is quite interesting
ranked.
also. We didn't specifically look at that, but in the literature on the quadratic voting, they do some comparisons with that. They have some justification why they think the quadratic voting is an improvement on ranked voting. But they're related to each other, and they're both pretty important processes. So that would be worth, you know, when we get further along in this, that would be worth adding to the mix as to what we consider.
Just to clarify, my motivation in that was so that if you were trying to negate corruption of the voting process, then by then, well, if that's the whole motivation, anyways.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
if
Yeah,
you couldn't
I think you're
guarantee
right
your vote
that
was
that's
gonna
also
be-
an important process that would be worth taking a look at.
Yes, yeah, that's all. Thank you. I'll look that up.
Could any of this be used for, say, the CA assessments?
Yes, and we had a good discussion about that a couple of weeks ago in one of the after town hall meetings. So the CA process is also a voting process. And so we haven't looked at that yet, but I understand there's data available for that as well. And, you know, that's definitely worth taking a closer look at because, you know, the actual voting now is heavily influenced by how this CAs rank the proposals. And, you know, in looking at that, that's also a challenging process. And there's things that are very positive that have come out of that, but there's also things that look like they may be a concern in terms of making sure that we're getting high quality reviews. I think what I'll do, this has been a great discussion and I want to continue with it, but I think what I'm going to do is close the recording for now. And really appreciate everyone's input and appreciate the time you've spent with us. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with the community to make, to really achieve the goal of decentralized decision-making. So thank you, everyone.